Hey, everyone. Welcome to the latest podcast episode. This is your host, Terry Knight. And man, I got a special guest today and someone that I've been looking forward to talking to. His background is amazing. We're talking about a former FBI agent, over 25 years of national security, law enforcement, private protection experience as well. And he studied human behavior. I mean, he just, you want to know him because he's just done it all. And it's not often that I talk to people in this caliber because it's either you're in trouble or you're about to get in trouble, right? Because they're about to raid you and do all this kind of weird stuff. But it's cool to kind of pick your brain, Efren, and just learn what you're about and talk about your book, man. So I appreciate it.
Absolutely, Terry. Good to be here. As I was saying off camera, I love your last name. That's so badass.
I appreciate it, man. Yeah, Knight. Just trying to carry on the name and do all the right things, and we'll see what happens.
Right on.
Appreciate it. So Efren, man, let's get to it, man. Let everyone know who you are, and we'll kind of go from there.
Yeah, my background is protecting people in different ways. So I joined the bureau, the FBI, in 2000. So that I worked national security, that's spies, terrorists, counterespionage, that kind of stuff. The second half of that was the criminal division, which is the more traditional understanding of the FBI, like you see in books and movies more frequently, putting bad guys in jail and that sort of thing. I was assigned to civil rights, which is less common. So that's hate crimes, human trafficking, and color of law or bad cops. And then after that, I went into the private protection world, which is like bodyguard world or threat assessments. So I look at that as like the trifecta of a protection career. And now I'm evolving it into like kind of a fourth branch, which is education and encouragement for the good guys, exposing the bad guys. The Wizard of Oz behind the curtain as being this, squirrely, weak coward is more reality of what the bad guys truly are, like Chihuahuas barking at the doorbell.
I love it, man. I love the whole summary. Let's deep dive in first, though, to your FBI, like your whole journey with that, man. Like, how long does it take to be an FBI agent anyway? Like, what's the whole process with that?
Well, it's very competitive. And I often say it's not that difficult to be in it because you need an education, relevant work experience, and to not have a sketchy background with like drugs or getting arrested, that sort of thing. But I was talking to somebody on a detail a couple days ago, and I realized, I mean, I knew it was competitive, but I guess they applied back in the day, and they said it was really hyper competitive, which I guess it does make sense. Because the bureau itself, or the agents, are much smaller than like a large police department. They're smaller than Los Angeles Police Department, New York Police Department, but it's the FBI. They're federal. So I guess it is very, very competitive. And they could pick and choose since they have so many applicants. So yeah, it's pretty tough. I never worshiped the FBI or the CIA or any other agency. I just wanted to help people. And I remember choosing the FBI because I thought they were the best at it, had the best resources, the best reputation, that sort of thing. It's always embraced the unofficial title of the FBI, which is fidelity, bravery, and integrity. And as an idealistic young adult, I was all over that. And when I would speak for the FBI to different groups, I would often ask the audience, just to kind of break the ice, who knows what the FBI stands for? Everybody's raising their hand. Investigate, like all that. And I said, yes, but there's something else. And then eventually I get to the fidelity, bravery, and integrity. And that's kind of a good icebreaker and kind of inspiring. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I mean, it does take a while. It takes discipline. And it's just like anything else, being goal-oriented and having long-term goals and chopping them up into short-term goals. And that's how you accomplish a lot of things in life.
Oh, man. So we're talking about 2000s. You joined the FBI. It's very competitive. I don't know if this is confidential or not, but what are you? Do you have to be trained, obviously, to use a gun, kind of go through different scenarios? Like, do you guys do training a lot during those years to kind of make sure you're always...
Since I was under both divisions, the National Security Division teaches you all the secret stuff that most people don't know about. The tradecraft, the ideology, the bad guys, the government interaction sort of thing. So most of that stuff is secret stuff. But the criminal division is more like what you see even in the training segments. Like it's at Quantico, which is a Marine base in Virginia. and we have our FBI Academy on that Marine base. So you're going through 2 barriers to get to the academy. And when I worked national security stuff in Washington, D.C., the academy is about an hour south of Washington, D.C., 45 minutes to an hour. And there's a library there, there's training facilities there, there's firearm stuff there. It's great, and it's historic. So when I was in graduate school, I was already a bureau employee. So sometimes I would drive down and just use the library at the academy because nobody else is there. Not even FBI people, frankly. It was just me, a bunch of books, and a librarian. So I'd do a lot of my graduate school work there just when I needed that extra inspiration. And living in Washington, D.C. also, I'd sometimes go to the Library of Congress. Not often, but sometimes. Just because you're there and it's historic. So imagine working on your own projects in the Library of Congress or the FBI Academy Library. It's just very inspiring. And like I said, as a young adult, like young guys just really, we're idealistic, which is a good thing. But we learned like a lot of uncomfortable truths about life, which I wrote about in my book. How sometimes the negative Nancys are in your own household, your own office buildings, your own social circles. They're not always on the outside. And that's some wisdom you get as you get older. But I lay it out in the book. So if anybody wants a cheat sheet, that blueprint is there.
That's so cool, man.
Yeah.
And I guess when you're in the you're in the FBI, right? You get like a little badge, not a little badge, but like a badge to identify yourself and all that good stuff.
In the national security side, you get identification also, just in case you have to interact with law enforcement, because we're doing all kinds of things and we're in different places spying on the spies. But in the traditional side, the criminal division, you've got a badge and identification, and you're shooting, you're doing raids, you're doing arrests, you're collecting evidence, you're following due process, you're making sure everybody's following due process, and primarily you're making sure everybody's safe. So when you do a raid, you think about a lot of things that the average movie director or author writing fiction might not think about, like controlling all the subjects, even if they're not the suspect that you're after. We call them subjects. But anybody who's in the house, you're controlling them for safety. And then once everybody's controlled to some tactical degree, then you're searching for weapons. And it's all safety first before evidence. And then once you prioritize that the place is safe, looking at couch cushions, whatever, for safety reasons, everything's code 4, what the police would say, clear. And then you start the investigative process of looking for evidence, interviewing, disclosing, giving warrants, that explaining all that. But safety is always first. And the details of safety is quickly kind of brushed by in movies and books where like they just enter and okay, clear. No, not clear. Not clear at all. We have to check that. We have to check the attic. There's a closet over there. So there's a lot of minutia in reality that would be boring in a book or a movie, I guess. And then some of that minutia is uncomfortable truths too. Like there's babies with food around their mouth and snot on their nose that you feel bad for, and you want to make sure they're not scared. Like a lot of little details that people don't really think about when they think about FBI stuff, but it's really about people at the end of the day. The FBI is just a government agency run by a bunch of people. The bad guys are doing their thing, but they all have families, they all have friends, they have neighbors. There's a lot of minutia in the real world of law enforcement and protecting people. My chapter 16 of my book is Power is a Natural Corrupter Unless You Insert Humility. So I'm going off on a tangent, but I think it's an important point. When somebody has power, whether it's good looks, money, authority, a gun, they're elected HOA president, whatever that power is, big or small, you will 100% be corrupted by it if you don't humble yourself with it. Marcus Aurelius, who was one of the rare few amazing emperors in Rome, he wrote Meditations. He said, it's possible to live a good life even in a castle. And I love that because you think, well, you're in a castle. Of course you're going to live a good life. No, but the opposite is true. All that power is so enticing, you'll probably live a corrupt life. But he deliberately, tactically, proactively humbled himself on the regular. And he wrote in his diary, which we now know as meditations, all those proactive efforts to be humble. He didn't articulate it like I am, but you could see in his writings, just striving for virtue would be more of his language. And all those things are humble. And he was the most powerful person in the planet. But you and I know people who, elected class president or HOA president, and it goes to their heads. They're ready to start marching with locked knees, Achtung! Das da tun them. You know what I mean? It gets crazy. Power is a natural corrupter. But the best people, think of all the best leaders in the world are people who have power, who are super cool, and they're very humble. And then think about some of the people who have just a little bit of power, and they start treating people like crap. And this is humanity. And you're thinking of specific examples right now, and so is your audience, which is delicious. This is psychology. This is the beauty of understanding human behavior, because the truths are there. But we all want comfort, so we often close our eyes and ears to a lot of uncomfortable realities, like your family member might not have your back, or the person you've known all your life that you grew up with might not have your back. Just because you've known them forever doesn't mean they're the best person to associate with. You get it.
Yeah, definitely. What do all criminals have in common, man? 'Cause you have 25 years worth of awesome experience through both those chapters of your life, FBI and all that good stuff. What do they all have in common?
Well, good guys and bad guys all have one thing in common. Or if you're human, you're mortal. If you're mortal, you're flawed. You have weaknesses, insecurities, and failures. So we all have that in common. But what all the criminals have in common is, this is ironic, counterintuitive, but that's the whole theme of my book. What they have in common is extra weakness, extra cowardice. It seems oftentimes that the criminals are big and strong. They're big bullies or tyrants and criminals with a gun, and they're scary and intimidating, and they are dangerous. But it's that weakness that makes them criminals, bullies, and tyrants. If they were truly strong, they would be kind, they would be humble, they would be generous, they would be thoughtful. But the path of least resistance is evil. It's easier. You and I are good guys, so we think it's easier to be good, but really you're going against gravity by being good. We're just used to it. We're in shape for it. So like when you're working out a muscle, you're literally tearing muscle for increased strength. So adversity is helping us grow. And when you get scars, that scar tissue is actually stronger than the silken skin that's never been harmed. It's the same kind of thing. What we do with our traumas, our difficulties, our obstacles is we're humbled, and then we grow from it with wisdom because we try. It's an effort. What they do when they're humbled, they're not humbled. They're just get pissed off. They get angry. They start blaming. They blame the world. They become the bad guy of the story. But it's a choice. Even if you're not making a choice, that itself is a choice. So blaming, hating, this is what the beauty of like fictional stories is the choice. Everybody has the bad thing happen to them, but the bad person chooses to go one way and the good guy chooses to go the other way. And what they have in common is weakness that comes from selfishness. And so they hurt others for their temporary gain. And the good guys don't hurt others because they're being selfless, and they grow from it, or they empathize from it. They do all the other effort stuff. In summary, I always use the metaphor of the chihuahua at the doorbell, barking. So whenever you think of bad guys, think of chihuahuas barking at the doorbell. They're weak, and that's why they're so loud, because they're scared that whatever's on the other side is going to be able to see inside them. Their cowardice.
I love that analogy.
Yeah. It's vivid.
Efren, it is vivid. It makes sense. Efren, do you have a badass story throughout your FBI career that you can share that's not confidential? Or
I have a lot of really good stories. Most of them are confidential, but you could imagine like some of the stuff came out. Well, like when I was in the National Security Division, me and our team, which is a lot of people, I just participated. I was just one of many people. But we helped catch one of the biggest spies in all of history who was betraying the United States over 20 years. He was an FBI person, but a high-level FBI person. Robert Hansen. I could talk about it because it came out. They literally made a movie about it called Breach. It's an okay movie. Just having that level of betrayer is really frustrating because everybody's just trying to do their best and trying to help our country and protect our infrastructure and protect what the United States stands for. Well, it used to be that way. Now it's not that like that so much. And he was just for insecure weakness reasons. He was satisfying his own ego and look at me and look what I'm getting away with and nobody knows, and all this kind of like egocentric mindset to betray your country. And it's one of the rare cases where you catch a spy red-handed, because once we finally we were on somebody else, and then we realized it was this person. What I can't get into is all the details of how you go from A to B and all that. Once we realized it was Hansen, we started paying attention to him, and eventually, when the arrest was going to happen, the agents went. I wasn't an agent at the time; I was doing the spy stuff. But then you have the agents do the criminal side of it, and he came out of this wooded area where he was going to drop off a bunch of documents to his handler, and he came out and on videotape got him red-handed making the drop, which never happens in the spy world. And so a colleague of mine took the video of his actual arrest, and it's a beautiful arrest. One of the agents, he first grabbed him, kind of gave him a good jerk, tactically controlling him, because he was an agent too, so he was probably armed, so it was a safety thing. But it was satisfying to see him get jerked and then cuffed. So that was probably one of the bigger ones in the spy world. In the criminal world, I mean, a lot of this isn't so much me, but a lot of like evil stuff has happened, and I just feel good that I was able to help end it so it doesn't happen anymore. And I'm thinking of some human trafficking cases, some color of law cases, bad cops. When I investigated, criminal police, I exonerated probably 98% of the accusations as false accusations because they weren't merited. But when they were guilty, they were very guilty. So I looked for a systemic pattern of criminal behavior. So my point is not accidents. Like, people make mistakes and that sort of thing. But you could tell when somebody's a criminal versus somebody messing up or something getting out of hand or whatever. So the criminals made a habit of it, and then they built a network of, I guess, bad guy allies to work with and cover for themselves. And good cops don't want to work with guys like that. So they all know who they are, but they don't really talk about it. So it's almost like I would compare these groups of bad cops when they were legitimate, when the accusations were legitimate. I'd compare them to like tumors in the department. And if the tumor's left there, it's going to grow and expand its cancer. And so I looked at that role to investigate the color of law violation, to extract the tumor. And then you have to do the chemotherapy, because if not, it'll grow again. And that chemotherapy is the administrative investigation that the department themselves has to do, the prosecution of the bad guys, the explanation to all the good cops and what's going to happen and changing administration and all the hassle that comes after it, just to ensure that cancer doesn't come back. And it feels good to contribute to help a department get healthy again, but it's messy, and like cancer is messy. So I think that's an excellent analogy with it. But it got really bad. I wrote about a few of these stories, but one in particular where one of my main subjects, he learned about the investigation and put a shotgun to his chest and pulled the trigger. And that was pretty intense. And he did it out in the open in this grassy knoll area, where all of his colleagues drive past this grassy knoll to get to the department. So he's kind of a dramatic guy. But yeah, these are real people's lives. So it's not just, oh, the movie's over or the book's done. It's a big responsibility. That's why I think it's really important to be humbled by power, because it's not just shining your badge and looking in the mirror, look, I'm an FBI agent. It's really about helping people. And when it becomes not about helping people, you should get out.
Hmm. Okay. Well said, man.
Yeah.
It's funny you brought that up. Chapter 16 about power. This is probably an off subject, but
Yeah.
Diddy's in the news, like all this stuff that's going on, the raids. A lot of people saying that you don't just get raided not unless they have something on you. Is that true when it comes to stuff like that? When they have to kind of identify and get evidence and kind of see what's going on a deeper level? Like, what's your intake on that whole
Uh,
situation?
Legally, yes. I left the Bureau in 2015, so a lot's happened since I have left. But in general, the FBI's role is to enforce federal law. And federal law emanates from the rights explicitly from we're upholding the Constitution, which comes from the Declaration of Independence. And the Declaration of Independence gives everybody their rights. So you can't have people just steal your stuff. So just as an example, and that's why murder is considered a Fourth Amendment violation, because a Fourth Amendment is people taking your things or just invading your property and taking your things, and taking your life is considered like legally theft. So that's why murder is illegal. But generally speaking, your rights as a citizen of the United States cannot be infringed by another person. And if they're infringed by another person, that's what makes a crime. So, and then you can't just accuse people of things without having evidence to back it up, or everybody would just be accusing anybody who just disagreed with them.
Yeah.
But the reason I'm explaining things so abstractly is because I've seen an uncomfortable trend recently where when people disagree now or make people uncomfortable, they're starting to accuse them of some pretty gnarly things that you're disrespecting real victims of racism, for example, when you call somebody a racist because you don't agree with them. You're disrespecting everybody who's been lynched or anybody who's gone through the Holocaust when you call somebody a racist just because you disagree with them and they're not racist. And you're disrespecting every rape victim when you accuse somebody of rape and you weren't raped. You're disrespecting every legit victim of a crime when you just attribute the person to these things. They're just hijacking words. And terrorism, I remember during the COVID-19 thing, there were a bunch of parents who were standing up for their kids in kindergarten and preschool or elementary school for not forcing them to take the vaccine because it could be unhealthy and it was experimental and that sort of thing. So the people who didn't like those parents standing up for their kids called them terrorists. And so you're disrespecting everybody who's ever died of a terrorist attack. Women, children. I cited in the book the Oklahoma City bombing where a couple pregnant women died and elderly people died. A lot of innocent people died from terrorism. So when you call somebody a terrorist just because they're defending their kids and they disagree with your policy, that's a bigger insult.
Yeah.
So back to your question, legally, you have to have due process. You have to have legal evidence to actually support the reasonableness of doing a raid. And a judge has to approve that with his legal experience, his or her legal experience, and see that the evidence is corroborating and there's reasonable suspicion that that person did that crime. And then later, their right to a trial, will prove it or not. But at that point, the burden is not as high as it is to convict somebody. Right now, the cops would say a suspect, we would say a subject, but they're presumed to be guilty of this. So that evidence signed off by the judge allows them to go in and do a raid to actually verify or corroborate if this reasonable suspicion is true. So these are kind of legal terms, but it's all trying to delicately respect the right of the individual for P. Diddy and other citizens. Now, hypothetically, if an entity were to raid somebody and they didn't have evidence, but it was almost kind of like an intimidation, like keep your mouth shut or you have to comply or we're going to harass you, that is illegal. That's tyranny. And if somebody were to plant evidence, for example, that's crime on the other side. That's tyranny again. That's corruption. So I don't have any specific information about the P. Diddy case, but theoretically, if they did everything legally, that means they have enough evidence to at least support reasonable suspicion that he's guilty of XY crime. And then once you do the raid, you're trying to corroborate that reasonable suspicion and see if, oh, we were wrong. It was just this instead of that. Or look, this is everything we found. It supports our reasonable suspicion. Now it's not just suspicion. Now let's take it to court and see if we could prove it in front of a jury of their peers who's objective, But our court system is an adversarial system. So you give the prosecutors the right to present their evidence and the defense attorneys the right to say, no, that's not legit because of this argument, or that's unreasonable because of this argument. So and then the jury gets to hear both sides. So that's theoretically the whole thing. But it's a big deal to get approved by a judge. So there must be something there if they're legit. But if they're corrupt, then who knows? And I've seen in my own suspicion evidence of both. I mean, not in P. Diddy, but in general. Like, that doesn't sound reasonable. Certain things in the news that I wasn't privy to, but I questioned the legitimacy of some raids before, just in general law enforcement.
Gotcha. Cool. I mean, that actually makes sense because, you hear all things online on the news. So I think, Efren, you broke that down pretty well, man. So that's pretty cool to know.
Thanks.
Also scary at the same time because, the way I think about it with you guys as an FBI, I think of you guys like Will Smith, Man in Black with the glasses, all serious and whatnot. But
we can't talk about the alien stuff. They won't let me.
Oh, really?
No.
Top secret. Efren, you now do private protection, right?
Yeah.
So how does that work? I know there's movies out there, we've seen them, but like, how does that work for you as far as protecting someone and what goes behind all that stuff?
Yeah. Nowadays they call it executive protection, which is just the modern lingo for the professional bodyguard. There's a lot of guards out there that, they're just hired as a guard to witness potential crimes and report it so that they could get the police to handle suspicious activity. But then there's executive protection. It's kind of a higher level. They typically have law enforcement or military background where they're able to assess threats from their experience and also de-escalate threats so that they don't get worse versus just reacting emotionally or making things worse. Mm-hmm. So the realm of being a bodyguard is threat assessment. At least in my experience, it's threat assessment, being able to articulate and be a consultant to your client on what's dangerous, what's not so dangerous, what's a hazard, potential hazard, let's eliminate that. So you're advising them as a consultant to keep them safe. So that's private protection, where you're close protection with a person, movie star, a business person, just somebody typically of high wealth or high exposure. And you're protecting their physical safety and you're protecting them from embarrassment. So it's not just, obviously physical safety is number one priority, but helping them be productive and not be embarrassed. Like I think, I remember this story, this happened where this random guy threw a shoe at George Bush. Remember that video? Yeah. And then George Bush ducked it. Yeah. He didn't have a gun. He wasn't trying to kill him, but he hated him. And he threw a shoe at him. And there have been other incidents where like movie stars have had things thrown on them like glitter or paint to symbolize blood or whatever. But they're not killing them, but it's still embarrassing. It is dangerous because you don't know what the threat is. But that sort of thing. It's not just life and death all the time, though. So it's individuals with close protection. It's corporations for active shooter threats or inside threats from the inside, like sketchy employees. Like just Recently, Google had a lot of their employees arrested when they couldn't be controlled. They were protesting inside their Google facilities for Pakistan or the Palestinians, the whole Israel Palestinian argument. They're essentially promoting and supporting Hamas inside the Google studios, so Google had them arrested because they wouldn't stop. So that came from the inside. That's kind of alluding to what I started with, that sometimes the enemies aren't on the outside, sometimes they're on the inside. And that's uncomfortable, but it's a reality to be aware of. So private protection with individuals, corporations, and then the last one is events. Like out here in Los Angeles, we have different kinds of awards for movies and music. So they'll have these different events. And sometimes these high net worth clients will have these exclusive parties or weddings and that sort of thing, where a lot of other people on the outside want to participate in or sabotage or photograph, and they need protection for the event. So those are temporary gigs that, I'm asked that, can you help with this? Can you help with that? And so I'm always scheduling every month. Like I've got some permanent things and then some temporary things every month that I'm working on. Just a couple of days ago, I was on, I can't talk about what it is, but there's going to be a really cool movie coming out probably in the next couple of years. And I was on the set of that just outside of Los Angeles. And that was a cool experience. Helicopters, actors, that whole thing. So that's a lot of fun too.
Of course, man. That's pretty awesome. It's funny you mentioned like assessing threats as a bodyguard, private protection, or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
I'll give you an example. Messi, because I'm in South Florida, I'm in Miami.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
He has his own like guy that does his whole bodyguarding, like to the T, like right next to him when he's playing, eating, like everywhere.
That guy's good. I've seen him.
He's really good.
Yeah.
But I guess he's been with him so long, he knows how to assess threats in a certain manner. In your eyes, how would you assess threats when you're working with protecting people?
Yeah, that's a good question. This could also generalize to your audience because there's threats everywhere, and sometimes people overreact and oftentimes people underreact. So do you know this is kind of aging myself, but do you know the game Whack-A-Mole?
Whack-A-Mole? No, never heard of that. Before
like awesome video games and gaming and all that stuff, we had these cheesy machines where these little, Chuck E. Cheese. So I think they're still around. So that was pretty popular when I was a kid. And they had these games where this little pretend mole would come out of like a grid of like 9 holes. And you have this little like softened hammer, and it would pop up and you hit it, and another one pop up and you hit it, and you get tickets if you hit a lot of them. Anyway, so this is called Whack-A-Mole. So when you're assessing an environment, the first thing you do is get a feel for what the norm is. And if you're at a Taylor Swift concert and you have Swifties everywhere, they all kind of have a look, a vibe, a smile that fits. And if you have a whack-a-mole, some dude there without a smile wearing camo, that gets your attention. So that's a whack-a-mole for attention. So you're looking for anomalies. If you're at Starbucks, people are getting food in a long line. Other people are on the phone. Other people are on the computer. That's your vibe. That's your norm. Then you look for an anomaly. Some guy comes in a clown suit and a big black backpack. Like, what are you doing here? So it's normally not that obvious. But questioning the anomaly, the whack-a-mole that pops up, is step number 1. And you don't react emotionally like, oh, it's a terrorist. He's wearing a gun. No, I'm just a clown. I'm going to a kid's birthday. And okay, get off of me. So you don't want to overreact. You just want to pay attention. And so de-escalation is the number 1 step as a bodyguard, even if it's something legitimate. So challenging them with a polite conversation, just saying, hey, what do you recommend? The orange muffin or the Danish? You're just getting you're really gathering evidence. Are you corroborating your suspicion? Or is it discounting your suspicion? Or is it a friendly person, or is it somebody cross-eyed mouth breather who's like talking to aliens? So that's investigation on a dime. So paying attention is step number one, and the efficient way to pay attention is whack-a-mole. Establish a norm and then look for the anomalies. Secondly, when you see that your suspicions are corroborated, then you have to do something about it, versus ignoring it. I saw a video yesterday. I procrastinate like everybody on Instagram sometimes, and I saw a video of this girl in Chicago on a college at a university that was getting robbed. The guy had a gun, and she instinctively grabbed the gun, and she was able to somehow get the magazine out, and I think the gun dropped her, but she was able to escape, which is perfect. But the whole time, it's right in front of this little grassy area. This dude is there, like probably 10 feet away, just watching with his arms on, like here. He's just chilling, watching the whole thing. Zero instinct. Zero, I'm going to help her. And eventually you see him, after it's over, get up and run away. It's all on camera. And so that's what you don't do, which is nothing. Especially a woman getting attacked. Do something. But she defended herself. She defended him without knowing it, So that's what you don't do. You have to do something. And remember to encourage your audience and to encourage my reader, even though the bad guys are dangerous, and they are dangerous, and they're intimidating, know that you're stronger than they are. Just by the mere fact that you're not a bad guy means you're more selfless, you're more thoughtful, and you have more courage to take risk and to live life and all that sort of thing. And to be kind, which takes strength. And the bad guys are more self-motivated. They have all this pain, this gushing pain from their trauma from the past, and they're trying to fix it with these little Band-Aids. And it's bleeding past the Band-Aids. But every time they feel a little bit of buoyancy of doing a little power trip, a robbery, an insult, whatever the bad thing is, they're just putting Band-Aids over these wounds. But the good people have all these wounds that they're working on, and they're actually mending, and they're getting stronger, and they're growing from them, just like torn muscle to get stronger, or scar tissue. It's all connected, but knowing that you're stronger than the bad guys should in some way encourage you to know that you can step up. It doesn't mean you have to confront them, but you could think tactically. The best thing to do in a violent situation is leave if you can. But if your life's on the line, don't give in. Fight back.
100%. That's funny because that's what my wife says. She's like, if something happens to me, I'm going to fight back. Like, there's no way I'm just going to not do anything. So
yeah, that's good advice. Great. I love that she told you too. So you could kind of feel some level of comfort from that she's not just going to give in.
Yeah, exactly. Efren, man, before the podcast started, we talked about breaking rules.
Yeah.
And I think you summed that up so perfectly. And I don't want to say it wrong, but like you mentioned, there's a good time to break the rules and when not to, but you don't always have to follow it. And could you kind of just elaborate that in detail?
Yeah. I look at rules as they're important and they're guidelines. Like we've got guardrails on the edges of cliffs for a reason, for our own protection. And people, governments, institutions have these rules for good reasons. But there's a time to not follow the rules. And a classic extreme example would be, there was a time when slavery was legal in the United States. Actually, it was never legal, but it was allowed. So it was kind of an unspoken, it's okay to do. Doesn't mean it's right. And then in Nazi Germany, there was a time when the rule was turn in all the Jewish people and all the LGBT people and all the people who went against the National Socialist movement, the Nazis, and put a gun to that person's head because they're Jewish or they're gay or they're black or whatever. And that would be a good time to break the rule, even if you die. It's better to die than go dark side. So if you're so accustomed to following the rules without thinking, then you could see how the stormtroopers became Nazis. They probably joined their own law enforcement worlds with the idea of helping their country. And then somewhere along the line, they stopped thinking and they just got accustomed to following orders, and they ended up participating in the in slavery or in concentration camps and that sort of thing. And that's the oldest dynamic in history. This has happened in all kinds of contexts throughout our human history. And thinking is the only antidote. So as soon as you stop thinking, people are going to lead you. So I encourage your audience and my readers to, in a healthy way, break the rules when you don't have to, follow them. For example, if something's immoral, don't follow that rule in spite of the consequences. And to practice when something's completely safe, and the example I gave before we started the podcast, when it's 3 a.m. and there's no traffic out there and you're at a red light and it says no right turn on red and you want to make a right, don't wait for the light to turn green. Please turn right on red, even though the sign says no right on red, when it's safe. Practice breaking rules and thinking when it's safe to do so. You're allowing yourself to think. And I know this is not a popular opinion, but I'm not a big fan of popular opinion. Common sense is an oxymoron. Conventional wisdom is an oxymoron. As long as you're thinking, the tyrants can't take advantage of you. And when you give up thinking and you stop thinking, you're giving up your freedoms. And when you give up your own freedoms, you're giving up society's freedoms, and you're just feeding the tyrants. You're encouraging the tyrants. So in summary, never stop thinking, question, even when it makes people uncomfortable, and question your own thoughts and whatever society tells you is appropriate. Another huge example is they always say in family dinners and different gatherings, don't talk about religion or politics. Like, you've heard that?
Yeah.
And you have to actually stop and ask yourself, why? Why not? And the answer is reality versus comfort. And everybody's so addicted to comfort, including myself. It's a human thing. But if you disagree with somebody, you might actually get to some level of truth or some understanding of reality. And that will emanate cognitive dissonance for the person who doesn't want to know that truth. So comfort is our default. So that warm blanket of ignorance, terrorists don't want to kill us. Non-law-abiding citizens, in other words, criminals, will listen to anti-gun laws if we make stronger gun laws. By definition, they're criminals. They don't obey the law. So if you start making all these gun laws, who's going to obey those laws? Law-abiding citizens, by definition. Good guys. So you're arming the bad guys, and you're disarming the good guys when you do that. That's the reality part that makes people squirm. That's just an example. Mm-hmm. And when you're not talking about religion or politics, God and governments, you're not talking about two pretty important things. And you're not talking about it, and that propaganda of don't talk about religion and politics is helping potential tyrants thrive, and it's hurting the proletariat from being independent and free. So that's where it all connects.
Well said. I love it. I love it. Efren, you're an author of a book, right? Opposite is True. What can people learn from this book? What's the whole purpose of it?
So the whole title is The Opposite is True, and the subtitle is Discover Your Unexpected Enemies, Allies, and Purpose Through the Eyes of Counterintuitive Psychology. And I say counterintuitive psychology because it's about human behavior, how we interact with each other, what are our motives, including your personal motives. So I dive into psychology, but I try to avoid a lot of psychobabble and just get to the meat of everything and just speak. Mm-hmm. I write how we're speaking right now, pretty blunt. But I also fill it with stories, anecdotes, different scientific principles that support these stories, like when you tear muscle for increased strength. I use those metaphors to help communicate these human dynamics. But in summary, when somebody makes themselves vulnerable, it's a reflection of their strength. And when somebody's really loud, really aggressive, really screaming off the rooftops, and the context doesn't support that, then it's a high tendency that the opposite is true. Their inner frailty, like the chihuahua barking at the doorbell, the yap, 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 yap. So, look, I'm brave and strong. Don't you dare come in here. And then you open the door and it's this little dog yapping. So that's the whole Wizard of Oz idea. You know, you pull the curtain, it's this withery old man trying to create a big, loud presentation. So if people stop and think a little bit, they'll witness this all around them. With the really loud people, it's usually the opposite. Or when somebody's always accusing somebody of something without the appropriate context, that's called projection, and they're likely guilty of what they're accusing people of. You see that a lot in politics.
Yeah.
And I guess in relationships. So, yeah, the opposite is true. Points out a lot of these counterintuitive truths, but I layer it in a very building format so that I take you on this ride of human understanding yourself so you can understand others, and then bring you to encourage the reader to you only live once, kind of go for it. Climb your mountain to reach your summit, your long-term purpose. And you'll fall off, you'll get in the valley, but fruit grows in valleys and not on mountaintops. So that's where you gain wisdom when you're humbled. So instead of rejecting that, being humbled, you can embrace it and grow from it, that sort of thing.
Cool. All right. Where can people find this book? We're talking Amazon, obviously.
Yeah, it's on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, pretty much any retailer that sells books online. You could get it there, but Amazon, Barnes & Noble are the big one. You could find links to the book, paper, ebook, hardback on my website. There's links there. More about me, my Instagram. There's a few other podcasts. I've got a page with some podcasts linked there too. But it's efrendelgado.com, EFREN Delgado.
Cool. Guys, I'll have the link below. And your Instagram is the same?
Yeah.
Efren Delgado?
Yep, that's right.
Cool.
No space, no period.
All one word.
No
all
underscore.
straight.
Yeah.
No underscores. That's how I like it. Cool. Efren, man, I appreciate you for coming on, man, because this is your story and just your book. I think that can help out so many people. Like, I want to read it too.
Appreciate that. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you just for coming on. I like to ask guests this one last question. I can never remember it either, but it's lastly, the last question. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Take your time.
What keeps you going when you want to give up?
Well, I just know that the only time you fail is when you give up. So just knowing that success, the prerequisite to success is failure. So just because you're quote unquote failing, it's not true failure. All you're doing is learning. You're being humbled. So you will 100% succeed if you persist until you succeed. And you will 100% fail when you give up. So just choose. Keep it simple, you know.
Keep it simple. No, I love it. I love it. Guys, you heard it first. Efren Delgado, the great one and only. If you guys have any questions, comments, or concerns, please let me know. I'll have Efren's links below, his website, to get access to his book, Opposite.
The opposite is true.
Opposite is truth.
Yep.
And then, anything else in between, you can just reach out to him directly as well, get some insights. But thank you so much, Efren, for coming on, man. And to the next episode. Peace out, guys.
That was great, Terry. Thanks.
No problem. Thank you.